Hey everybody, I'm Patrick Curtis, CEO and founder of Wall Street Oasis. Today's story is another great one coming to you. This is Ryan, who is an engineering student at NYU. He came to us when things had kind of already passed, when he was already kind of late coming into recruiting for investment banking, asset management. He really was more leaning towards asset management. I think this story is really interesting because it really illustrates the power of WSO Academy and having over 1,300 mentors from our deep roster in your back pocket. Listen to what happened once we found out he had an interview at BlackRock. And I think his story is just a great example of anybody who's maybe switching careers or changing from, a non-finance major trying to make it over into high finance and how the academy can help you. Enjoy. All right, Ryan, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us today. Really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you just had, what, a 3-hour presentation?
Yeah, long one.
Wow. Okay. So Ryan's at NYU. He is going to be graduating early, but you'd otherwise be incoming second year, correct?
Junior.
Or
Yeah,
incoming,
junior.
sorry, third year. And so let's start off just quickly, just giving the listeners a summary of kind of your bio and obviously NYU, but a little bit more would be great.
Yeah, so I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, but my parents and stuff were from the East Coast, so I decided to go to the city, New York, and study actually at the engineering school NYU has there. I was pretty into doing stuff with my hands. I wanted to become an electrical engineer. And then probably later on down the pipeline, sophomore year, I had a finance class that I took that I really enjoyed. And that kind of swung me over into the finance world. And NYU being pretty good with that. I had a lot of buddies at Stern. And so I wanted to look further into that. And it was my second semester of sophomore year. So that's spring. And I was looking ahead for internships. And my roommate, who was a Sternie, said, "Oh, you don't have your internship yet?" And I was kind of caught off guard of this whole like finance world being really far ahead. So, and I was quite far behind and I had no idea. So
Yeah.
I tried to look around for open internships, see what I could do, and I never really got anywhere. I never even got past the hire view before.
Okay.
And so I turned to you guys after actually one of my buddies at Stern talked to you and have good reviews.
Great. Yeah. So I guess going back, like engineering, you like you said, you thought you were going to go engineering. When you had that finance class, I guess nobody told you, hey, you have to be your junior summer internship's going to be done by this your sophomore spring. Is that
Yeah, no one
no
said
one?
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we get a lot of like career changers or major changers, I'll call them, like where they're going from engineering or they're going from something else, and then suddenly they come middle of sophomore year realizing they have to run and race ahead or whatnot. So you came to us kind of after a lot of the on cycle had happened, right? Or it was kind of in the middle of
Pretty
it.
much.
So
I mean,
yeah,
after everything, for the most part, at least the bigger firms.
yeah. And so you weren't aiming for banking though, right? You kind of knew you want to do something more on the market side, or were you considering banking as well?
I was considering everything, but I definitely was leaning more towards asset management just because that's what I was interested in beforehand. Like when I was still an engineering kid,
Yeah.
I still dealt with my friends' money. Like they still came to me to see what investment should be good. So I
Awesome.
still had that kind of interest, and I just took it further
Awesome. And so
as I
then
went on.
when you came in and started working with us, obviously you had a history of like your background looked really strong. You obviously had the intellectual chops to be able to do this job. So the question was more about like, how do you approach this? So I'd love to hear like when you came in, what did you do first? So obviously your resume review, LinkedIn profile, but then like, how did you leverage the academy most for yourself, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, it was just getting comfortable speaking to people in a more professional setting. And in
Mhm.
terms of these types of interviews, the technicals I'm not really used to, and getting thrown questions along those lines I had never been asked before.
Mhm.
And also how to keep a conversation going for longer than a networking call, which will last sometimes like 15 minutes, and then get something out of that.
Yeah.
So the issue I really had was I had a bunch of people I talked to because I go to a school that has a large alumni base.
Yeah.
But at the end of the interview or the networking call, it would be, okay, nice to meet you. Have a good time. and that would be that. And it was trying to be able to leverage that networking call to either talk to more people, get a referral, or things along those lines. And so I probably spent 4 to 5 hours of my like one-on-one talks just going over how to interview properly in these networking calls, and how to deal with these behaviorals in a way where I can keep the ball moving forward.
Yeah, I feel like depending on personality, it's almost hard to put yourself in those shoes as like being more of a salesperson for yourself and be like,
Yeah.
is there anyone else I could speak with? Some people are like, it's horrifying to have to even ask that at the end of a networking chat, but obviously it's best practice, because warm referrals, obviously conversion is much higher to getting on networking calls. So you started, after doing some of that, getting more comfortable, you started doing it. And then I'd love to hear just about your process and your outcome. Like, let everyone know kind of what happened. Was it one of the first kind of interviews you did after kind of doing that stuff, or was it, a little bit further down the line? Because it wasn't that long.
No, I mean, I think I got pretty lucky. So I applied to BlackRock because actually you're on the Slack channel, you message people when applications open.
Yeah.
Which NYU doesn't have that. That really helps. By the way, you should keep going on that because that's good. Where I saw it. It's like, oh, okay, this is opening up. I'll apply. I'll do the higher views, because you also have a high metrics higher view thing.
Higher view simulation, and then the SHL numerical reasoning. Yeah.
And so I went through that, and then I didn't hear back for another month. So I'm like, okay, nothing happened. So I kept going with other firms and talking to people, and then like a week before the super day, I get the message saying, hey, you have a super day next week. And that was it. And I'm like, oh, okay. And it actually perfectly aligned because that time was in the middle of mock interview season for the academy.
Yeah.
So I switched everything up to going from what I was going to be prepping for to this, which really helped. So I spoke with one person who was in asset management, my first interview. And then I did Annie. I spoke with Annie probably the entire time.
Yeah.
And then from the deep roster, you guys actually pulled a BlackRock person, but in the exact same department I was interviewing for. So it actually worked out really well.
Did you name drop in the interview? Did you name drop, or did you
I did in the interview. I forget his name now, but I did name drop in the interview because he was apparently one of the original members of that group when it was formed.
Oh, cool.
So I got really lucky there. And then I did like 2 more preps, and then the super day came along. So timing wise, it worked out really well.
That's awesome. And so like when you got in there, was the super day, I assume, did they ask you like pitch a stock or talk to you about the market at all? Like did you feel like you need to know more like macro based stuff, or were they asking you like specific names for you?
For the most part, it was very behavioral. And the only technical things they asked for was pitch a stock. What was an investment that went wrong? Really simple technicals. It was mainly behavioral focused.
And you had put in all the reps with the mocks and all that stuff to be able.
Yeah. I will say the mocks were harder than the super day by far.
That's always a good place to be.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then when you were going through, did you get the grades coming out of those mocks at all? Did you get any report?
I did.
You did? Okay.
Yeah. I started off real low.
What were you scoring at the beginning versus the end? Like 70s, 60s? Or
I think I was lower than 70 at first.
Yeah.
Like it was pretty bad. But then I think my highest was a 90.
That's great. Yeah. And so I like to say, high 80s, low 90s is a really good target range for like being able to get an offer. So it's great to hear that you made that progress. How many total mocks do you think you did? Like 6 or more?
4 or 5. I think 5 or so.
Yeah, so that's
great. just on that, because it was in the middle of the season. So I did one before, and then I'm like, oh, let me switch gears.
Awesome. So like in terms of other people who are in a similar boat to you, like coming a little bit late, potentially looking at different things, any piece of advice you'd give them around just getting ready for stuff? Like, let's say, obviously academy help, but like, let's say they're saying, hey, I want to do this on my own too, or I want to try to give it a shot. What would you suggest as like the most important steps they take?
Yeah. I mean, the first part was being on time with the schedule of when you have to apply to these things. I know it's tough because it's so early and you might not know exactly what you want to do, but keeping up with when applications become live. I think a lot of firms post it on LinkedIn nowadays, or hiring managers do. That really helped me just to see, okay, I'm behind in these other things, but other firms are still coming out with their applications. And then also leveraging LinkedIn and the alumni community.
Mhm.
Being from the engineering school, I heard about Stern. I knew that it was a good school, but I didn't, you know, try and leverage that until later on when, you know, my school has a very large alumni base. And as long as you go to the school as a whole, it doesn't really matter if you're in the business college or
It's
not.
actually, yeah, that's actually, I was going to ask you, like, were the Sternies supportive when you reached
They
out?
act, yeah, because
Yeah.
I mean, if I just say I go to NYU, most of them will be like that, and I'm positive that's true for most schools, whether you're in the business school or not.
Yeah.
If you just say you're from the university as a whole, you have a much wider alumni base to work off of, and that really helped me.
That's awesome. So yeah, it sounds like you had already done, you're already kind of on your way on the networking side of things when you came in with us. You just kind of needed that confidence boost of like, you can ask for this, you can get that referral.
Yeah.
Did you end up in any other processes, or this was pretty early on after you kind of finished the mocks, you got the offer from BlackRock and you're like, okay, I'm good, I'm done.
Yeah, well, I did have an interview with Goldman. It wasn't the super day,
Yep.
but it was an interview because I talked to a VP. There was like one of the good networking calls that came out, and I was
Yeah.
like, oh, I'll try, see if I can get another offer.
Yeah.
It went all right, but I didn't practice as much with the technicals. So,
Yeah.
oh well.
Okay. Well, it's great to hear, man. I mean, I think it's obviously an amazing outcome, great firm. I assume you're excited. It sounds like you're racing to graduate now, so you can have maybe a little
Honestly,
break
yeah,
before you start.
pretty much.
That's awesome. But I just want to say thanks for coming on to share your story with everybody. And of course, I hope you stay in touch with us and obviously be open in the Slack too. We'll see you there.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ryan.